The vast expanse of the Arcturus galaxy stretched before the observation deck of the Aurora Edge, its swirling nebulae and star clusters forming a tapestry of conquest that had defined the Xandorian Empire for millennia. Grand Scout Admiral Zenth Var stood with perfect posture, hands clasped behind his back, reptilian eyes scanning the celestial bodies that had long since submitted to imperial rule. Another uneventful patrol. Admiral, Navigation Officer Alice approached, her slender frame barely casting a shadow in the dim light of the deck. Unlike most Xandorians, her scaled skin bore iridescent patterns that shifted with her movements, a trait from her mixed heritage that had initially made her advancement difficult in the rigid imperial hierarchy. As it should be, Zenth replied, his voice carrying the authoritative resonance typical of high-ranking imperial officers. The Emperor's peace has reigned for centuries. These patrols are merely formality. Alice nodded respectfully, but couldn't hide the gleam of curiosity in her eyes. The universe is vast, Admiral. Do you never wonder what lies beyond the charted territories? Zenth turned to face her, his expression hardening. The Xandorian Empire has cataloged every species worthy of note. Those we haven't encountered are primitive at best, barbaric at worst. Neither deserve our attention until they evolve enough to serve the Empire. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alert from the ship's communication system. Lieutenant Vorex, the communications officer, called out with uncharacteristic urgency, "Admiral, we're detecting an unusual signal from the Outer Rim, Sector 17B. Zenth's scaled brow furrowed. Sector 17B was considered part of the Wastelands, regions deemed too resource-poor to warrant Imperial exploitation. What kind of signal? Unknown classification, sir. It doesn't match any known Imperial or vassal communication protocols, Vorex replied, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. Its structure definitely artificial, but strange. Alice moved swiftly to her station, analyzing the incoming data. Her specialized neural implants interfaced directly with the ship's systems, allowing her to process information at speeds impossible for most Xandorians. Admiral, this signal contains mathematical sequences far too complex to be random. There's intelligence behind it. Impossible, Zenth muttered, moving to examine the data himself. The Imperial Registry contains every spacefaring civilization in Arcturus. Evidently not, Alice countered, then quickly added, sir. Zenth considered his options. Protocol demanded investigation of any potential new civilization. The Empire's doctrine of universal dominion required all intelligent species to either submit to Xandorian rule or face extinction. Yet a part of him was reluctant to waste resources on what was likely just an anomaly, perhaps a long-forgotten automated beacon. Sir, Vorex interjected, I've transmitted the signal pattern to Imperial Command as per regulation. There, requesting immediate verification. Zenth's mandibles tightened, a sign of displeasure among Xandorians. Command involvement meant the situation had escalated beyond his discretion. Very well. Set course for the signal's origin. Prepare a full diplomatic and military contingent. Hours later, Zenth stood in his private quarters, reviewing the official orders from Emperor Cyrus Amnath himself. The message was clear: investigate, classify, and if necessary, subjugate. Any new civilization must learn its place in the hierarchy of the galaxy, with Xandorians firmly at the apex. We depart for the Outer Rim in 30 minutes, he announced over the ship-wide communication system. All senior officers to the command deck immediately. As the Aurora Edge prepared to jump to hyperspace, Zenth couldn't shake an unsettling feeling. He had served the Empire for over 2 centuries, participating in dozens of first contact missions that inevitably ended with a new species added to the Empire's list of subjects. Yet something about this signal felt different, a disruption to the natural order he had come to accept as immutable. Hyperspace calculations complete, Alice reported as Zenth entered the command deck. Course locked on signal origin. Proceed, Zenth ordered, settling into his command chair. The Aurora Edge elongated impossibly as it pierced the fabric of space-time, vanishing into the swirling blue tunnel of hyperspace. None aboard could have predicted that what awaited them would challenge the very foundations of the empire they served. The ship emerged from hyperspace with calculated precision, immediately activating its advanced cloaking systems, standard procedure when approaching unknown entities. The crew expected to find perhaps a primitive outpost, or at most a small colony of some unregistered species. Instead, they found themselves staring at a fleet. Defensive positions. Zenth commanded, his training overriding his shock. Full sensor sweep. Before them floated an armada of approximately 30 to 40 vessels of varying sizes and configurations. Their design was unlike anything recorded in Imperial archives, sleeker than Xandorian ships, with less ornamentation but an undeniable elegance that spoke of advanced engineering. Most notably, they bore no identifiable insignia or markings that corresponded to any known civilization. "They're not in attack formation," Alice observed, her voice calm despite the tension permeating the bridge. "In fact, they appear to be in a standard patrol configuration." "Impossible," Zenth muttered for the second time that cycle. No unregistered species should have developed spacefaring capability at this scale without our knowledge. The silence on the bridge was deafening as the crew processed the implications. The Xandorian Empire, which had dominated the Arcturus galaxy for thousands of years, had somehow missed an entire civilization capable of fielding a substantial fleet. "Sir," Vorex reported, "they've detected us despite our cloaking. We're receiving a communication request on multiple frequencies." Zenth straightened his posture. First contact was always a delicate affair, but the Empire had protocols for such situations, protocols designed to establish Xandorian dominance from the outset. "Open a channel," he ordered. Standard Imperial greeting. The main view screen flickered to life, and the bridge crew collectively inhaled at the sight before them. The being on the screen appeared almost Xandorian-like in basic structure, bipedal, with forward-facing eyes and symmetrical features, but lacked scales, possessed strange fur on the top of their head, and had skin that seemed unnervingly soft and vulnerable. "This is Fleet Admiral Helena Crowley of the United Humanity Fleet." The being spoke in a clear, confident voice. "You've entered protected space. Identify yourselves." Zenth was momentarily taken aback by the directness of the address. Most newly contacted species showed appropriate deference, or at least caution, when facing an Imperial vessel. This creature was addressing him as an equal. "I am Grand Scout Admiral Zenth Var of the Xandorian Empire, sovereign power of the Arcturus galaxy," he replied, infusing his voice with the imperious tone expected of his rank. "Your vessels are operating in Imperial territory. You will submit identification and prepare to receive Imperial representatives to discuss the terms of your integration into the Empire." There was a pause, and Zenth could have sworn he saw the corners of the alien's mouth turn upward slightly, a gesture he couldn't interpret. "Admiral Var," Crowley responded evenly, "we are not in Imperial territory according to our star charts. The United Humanity Fleet respects the sovereignty of other species, but we do not and will not submit to anyone. We are, however, open to peaceful dialogue between equals." The audacity struck Zenth like a physical blow. He had encountered resistance before, but never such a calm, outright rejection of Imperial authority. "There are no equals to the Xandorian Empire," he stated flatly. "You will comply, or face the consequences of your insubordination." Admiral Crowley's expression remained impassive. "We prefer cooperation to conflict, Admiral Var. But make no mistake, humanity will defend itself if threatened." She paused, then added, "As a gesture of good faith, I'm transmitting basic information about Earth and our colonial alliance. I suggest you review it before making decisions you might regret." The transmission ended, and data began flowing into the Aurora Edge's systems. "Should I block it, sir?" Vorex asked, his finger hovering over the rejection command. "No," Alice interjected. "This could provide valuable intelligence." Zenth nodded reluctantly. "Screen it for any invasive code, then display the contents." What followed was a revelatory briefing on a species called humans. According to their own history, they had evolved on a planet named Earth, a world of extreme environmental variations, from frozen wastelands to scorching deserts, from massive oceans to towering mountains. Their biology had adapted to survive these diverse conditions, making them unusually resilient. Most disturbing was their history. Unlike most species that achieve unity before venturing to the stars, humans had spent most of their recorded history at war with themselves. They had developed weapons of mass destruction when they had barely mastered flight, and had brought themselves to the brink of extinction multiple times, only to emerge stronger. "This can't be accurate," one of the junior officers muttered. "No species could advance while being so fractured." "It explains their ships," Alice observed. "Look at the variations in design. They're not standardized like ours. Each seems to reflect different approaches to the same problems." Zenth felt a creeping unease. Imperial doctrine held that uniformity bred strength, that the standardization of Xandorian society, from ship design to social hierarchy, was what had allowed them to conquer the galaxy. These humans seemed to thrive on diversity and conflict. "Sir," Vorex interrupted his thoughts, "they're maintaining position, but their ships have shifted to a defensive formation. They're not initiating hostilities, but they're prepared for them." Zenth made his decision. Maintain position. No aggressive actions. He turned to his executive officer. "Prepare a detailed report for Imperial Command. Include all data on these humans. Emphasize that they represent a potential threat unlike any we've encountered before." As the report was transmitted through secure hyperspace channels, the Aurora Edge and the human fleet maintained their standoff. On the human flagship, Admiral Crowley reviewed her options. "They're sending data back to their command," her sensor officer reported. "Massive burst transmission." Crowley nodded thoughtfully. "As expected, they're calling for instructions or reinforcements." She turned to her second-in-command. "Commander Davis, prepare the fleet. We won't initiate conflict, but we'll be ready if they do." "Do you think they'll attack?" Davis asked, his expression grave. Crowley studied the imposing silhouette of the Aurora Edge on their view screen. "Their entire empire is built on subjugation. We've just challenged their fundamental belief system by refusing to kneel." She sighed. "History suggests they'll choose violence, but we'll give peace every chance." In the ornate chambers of the Imperial Palace on Xandoria Prime, Emperor Cyrus Amnath received the report from the Aurora Edge with growing concern. Surrounded by his most trusted advisors and military commanders, he reviewed the data on the newly discovered humans. "This is unprecedented," Grand Marshal Coravalin observed, her crimson scales gleaming in the artificial light. Unlike many of her peers, she had risen through the ranks by strategic brilliance rather than brutality. A civilization of this scale, completely unknown to our surveys. "A failure of intelligence, nothing more," growled Admiral Halax, the oldest and most decorated military leader present. "These humans have simply been hiding in the wasteland regions. Now they reveal themselves, and we shall do what we have always done. Subjugate or eliminate." Emperor Cyrus's tail twitched irritably, the only outward sign of his disquiet. "Their history gives me pause. A species that thrived on conflict, that developed weapons of mass destruction while still planet-bound. All the more reason to strike quickly," Halax insisted. "If allowed to expand further, they could become a genuine threat." Coravallin's eyes narrowed. "A valuable addition to the Empire, if approached correctly. Their adaptability could be useful. Their defiance is an insult to imperial dignity," another advisor hissed. "They must be taught their place." The Emperor rose, silencing the chamber with a gesture. "We have maintained dominance for millennia by recognizing threats before they fully emerge. These humans have revealed themselves at precisely the wrong moment for them." His voice hardened. "Assemble the Third Imperial Armada. We will demonstrate the consequences of defiance to these upstarts." From across the chamber, Coravalin spoke carefully. "Your Majesty, perhaps a more measured approach." "The decision is made," Cyrus cut her off. "The humans will submit or they will perish." That is the Imperial way. As plans for the largest military mobilization in 5 centuries began, Valen exchanged glances with several younger officers. Their expressions remained carefully neutral, but a current of unease passed between them. The Xandorian response came swiftly and without warning. Not at the location of the initial contact, but at a human colony world designated Terra Nova, a flourishing settlement on the edge of human space. The Third Imperial Armada, comprising over 200 warships, emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. At their center was the dreadnought Imperial Dominion, a vessel so massive it could eclipse a small moon, bristling with weapons capable of reducing planetary surfaces to glass. All ships in attack position, Fleet Commander Threx ordered from the Imperial Dominion's bridge. Launch fighter squadrons. Target their orbital defenses first. The colony's meager defense fleet, just 7 ships, moved to intercept, positioning themselves between the Imperial Armada and the planet below. "This is Captain Alera Way of the Terra Nova Defense Force," came the transmission. "Xandorian fleet, you are committing an act of war against humanity. Withdraw immediately." Threx laughed, the sound echoing across the command deck. "This isn't war, Primitive. This is pest control." He gestured to his weapons officer. "Open fire." The barrage from the Xandorian fleet was devastating, designed to overwhelm the defenders through sheer volume of fire. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes streaked across space, converging on the human vessels. What happened next would be debated in Imperial military academies for generations to come. The human ships, drastically outnumbered and outgunned, should have been vaporized in the opening salvo. Instead, they executed a series of maneuvers that seemed to defy the laws of physics. They stretched their formation, creating gaps that allowed much of the Imperial fire to pass harmlessly between ships. Individual vessels rotated and pivoted with a speed and precision that Xandorian captains could only envy, presenting minimal target profiles. And they returned fire. Human weapons technology proved unexpectedly sophisticated. Instead of the brute force energy weapons favored by the Empire, their ships fired projectiles that adjusted course in flight, tracking evasive Xandorian vessels. Other weapons emitted pulses that bent trajectories of incoming Imperial fire back upon itself. Most shocking of all were the swarms of small, unmanned craft that poured from the human ships. Drone fighters with no life signs aboard, moving with impossible precision in coordinated attacks that overwhelmed Imperial point defense systems. "Intensify forward firepower," Threx bellowed as the first Xandorian cruisers began to report critical damage. "Launch all fighters. They cannot withstand the full might of the Armada." Yet for every human ship destroyed, 3 Imperial vessels were crippled or destroyed outright. The elegant, asymmetrical combat style of the humans confounded Xandorian tacticians, who relied on overwhelming force and numerical superiority, advantages rapidly eroding as the battle continued. "Sir," a tactical officer reported, horror evident in his voice, "they're deploying ground forces. They're landing on Terra Nova." Threx's eyes widened. "Impossible. They cannot hope to hold the planet. Deploy our legions immediately." In the virgin forests of Terra Nova, Imperial drop ships descended through the atmosphere, disgorging battalions of armored Xandorian soldiers. The conquest of the planet's surface was expected to be routine. Civilian populations typically surrendered when faced with the ferocity of Imperial ground forces. The first indication that this would be different came when an Imperial Walker, a 12-meter armored assault vehicle, was disabled by what appeared to be a simple farming implement that had been modified into an anti-armor weapon. "Contact!" shouted Squadron Leader Vax as his unit came under fire from the tree line. "Civilian resistance at Vector 347. But these were no ordinary civilians. The human colonists fought with a ferocity that shocked the Imperial troops. Farmers wielded energy rifles with deadly efficiency. Construction workers had repurposed industrial equipment into improvised artillery. Children served as spotters, using the colony's communication network to coordinate defense efforts. "Fall back!" Vax ordered as half his squadron fell to precisely aim shots. Regroup and request air support. Across Terra Nova, the pattern repeated. Imperial forces, expecting to face untrained civilians, instead encounter a population where seemingly every adult was a capable fighter. Their tactics were unconventional but devastatingly effective. Ambushes, traps, hit-and-run attacks that denied the Xandorians the opportunity to bring their superior numbers to bear. Third Squad wiped out near the settlement center, came one report. 5th Battalion surrounded in the Eastern Highlands, came another. Air support ineffective. They've established some kind of energy shield over key positions, a third officer reported. On the bridge of the Imperial Dominion, Fleet Commander Threx received these reports with growing disbelief. The battle that should have been a straightforward demonstration of Imperial power had devolved into a chaotic struggle, with human forces consistently outmaneuvering his supposedly superior forces. Sir, his second-in-command approached hesitantly. Our casualties have exceeded acceptable parameters. We've lost nearly 40 vessels, and ground forces report unsustainable losses. Threx's mandibles clicked in agitation. Unacceptable. They are outnumbered. They are technologically inferior. They should be begging for mercy by now. Nevertheless, sir, we cannot maintain our position. The Emperor expected a swift victory. This is becoming a protracted engagement we may not win. The bitter truth of those words sank in as Threx watched another Imperial cruiser erupt into flames on his tactical display. The unthinkable had happened. The Xandorian Empire, which had not suffered a significant military defeat in over a millennium, was losing. Order a general retreat, he finally commanded, the words, tasting like poison. All forces to disengage and return to Imperial space. As the battered remains of the Third Imperial Armada limped away from Terra Nova, the humans made no attempt to pursue. Instead, they transmitted a single message, broadcast on all Imperial frequencies. We do not seek expansion through conquest. We seek only to protect our freedom. Remember this before you return. Admiral Zenthvar, who had been ordered to observe the battle from a safe distance, watched the retreat with a complex mixture of emotions. The humiliation of Imperial forces stung deeply, yet he found himself grudgingly respecting the humans' tactical prowess. Whatever else they might be, they were formidable opponents, perhaps the first worthy adversaries the Empire had faced in generations. Set course for Xandoria Prime, he ordered quietly. The Emperor must know the full details of what transpired here. The humans are not what we expected. The news of the defeat at Terra Nova spread through the Xandorian Empire with the speed of hyperspace communications, despite attempts by Imperial censors to control the narrative. On Xandoria Prime, the Imperial court was in an uproar. Incompetence! Admiral Halax roared, his age scales flushing dark with rage. Fleet Commander Threx should be executed for his failure. The failure was not Threx's, Cora Valen countered firmly. The failure was in our intelligence assessment. We underestimated the humans. Drastically, Emperor Cyrus sat silently on his ornate throne, his expression unreadable as his advisors argued around him. The defeat had wounded his pride deeply, but more concerning were the reports now flooding in from across the Empire. On a dozen worlds, subject species were showing signs of restlessness. The news that Imperial forces could be defeated was spreading, inspiring hope among those who had long resigned themselves to Xandorian rule. We must respond decisively, Admiral Halax insisted. Deploy the planet destroyers. Obliterate this Terra Nova as an example to both the humans and any who would emulate their defiance. A murmur of agreement rose from several military commanders, but Cora Valen stepped forward, her posture rigid with conviction. Your Majesty, such action would be catastrophic. Not only would it turn the entire galaxy against us, but we have no reason to believe the humans would not retaliate in kind. Their technological capabilities clearly exceed our intelligence estimates. If they possess comparable superweapons. You speak from fear, Marshal Valen. Halax interrupted dismissively. One colony world is nothing. The humans will break when they see their precious Terra Nova reduced to asteroids. And if they don't break, Koro Chelingst. If instead they unite in vengeance? Our reports indicate they evolved on a world with extreme environmental challenges, survived multiple near-extinction events of their own making, and developed technological solutions to problems most species would succumb to. Their history suggests they do not surrender when threatened. They escalate. The Emperor finally stirred, raising a clawed hand for silence. These humans, they did not pursue our retreating forces. They could have pressed their advantage, yet they chose restraint. Why? Weakness, Halak scoffed. Strategy, Korra countered. They sent a message with that restraint. They're signaling they don't want this war, but are prepared to fight it if we force them to. The debate continued for hours, but the Empire was divided. The traditional hardliners advocated for overwhelming force, the deployment of forbidden weapons that could annihilate entire worlds. The moderate faction, smaller but growing, urged caution and diplomatic engagement. Meanwhile, across the Empire, the fractures deepened. On Viridian III, a mining world that had been under imperial rule for 7 centuries, workers refused to deliver their quota of rare minerals. On Calax Prime, a vassal state, the local governor began quietly redirecting tribute meant for the imperial treasury to bolster planetary defenses. Most alarmingly, the Novik Confederation, a collection of systems that had been subjugated just 2 generations earlier, openly declared their independence from the Empire. We cannot fight wars on multiple fronts, Korra Valen warned during an emergency session of the High Command. Every ship we send to quell these uprisings is one we cannot use against the human threat. The human threat exists precisely because we showed weakness. Admiral Halax thundered. Crush them, and these minor rebellions will wither from lack of hope. In the midst of this turmoil, Admiral Zenth Var returned to Zandoria Prime. Summoned before the Emperor, he delivered his eyewitness account of the Battle of Terra Nova. Your Majesty, he concluded after recounting the tactical details, having observed their combat capabilities firsthand, I believe a full-scale war with humanity would result in casualties not seen since the founding wars. Even if we were to eventually prevail, which is far from certain, the cost would be devastating to the Empire. You advocate surrender, then? The Emperor asked, his voice dangerously soft. I advocate understanding our enemy before we commit to a course that cannot be reversed, Zenth replied carefully. The humans demonstrated both remarkable combat prowess and unexpected restraint. They fought to defend, not to conquer. This suggests the possibility of negotiation from a position of mutual respect. Admiral Halax made a contemptuous sound. Mutual respect? With primitives? You spent too much time with that half-breed navigation officer, Zenth. Her soft thinking has infected you. Zenth's scales darkened slightly, the Zandorian equivalent of a flush. Officer Alice's insights have proven valuable on multiple occasions, Admiral. And there is nothing primitive about an enemy that decimated a third of our most powerful armada. To Zenth's surprise, Grand Marshal Korra Valen moved to stand beside him. Admiral Var's assessment aligns with my own. We cannot afford a protracted conflict with the humans, while our own empire shows signs of fracturing. At minimum, we should open diplomatic channels while we reassess our military strategy. The Emperor's tail twitched in agitation as he considered their words. Finally, he spoke. Marshal Valen, you will attempt to establish secret communications with these humans. Determine if there is any path forward that preserves imperial dignity while avoiding further conflict. His gaze hardened. Admiral Halax, prepare your forces. If diplomacy fails, we will resort to the ultimate weapons at our disposal. As the imperial court dispersed, Korra Valen drew Zenth aside. You've seen them in combat, she said quietly. Are they truly as formidable as the report suggests? Zenth considered her question carefully. They are unlike any species we've encountered, Marshal. They don't fight like Zandorians, with overwhelming force and rigid formations. They adapt, improvise. Every human soldier seemed to be thinking independently, yet somehow maintaining coordination. He paused. And their technology, it's not just advanced, it's different. They've approached similar problems with entirely different solutions than our scientists. Cora's expression became thoughtful. Then we need to approach them differently as well. Traditional imperial diplomacy won't work. They've already rejected the concept of submission. The navigation officer on my ship, Alice, she has an unusual perspective that might be valuable in this situation, Zen suggested. Bring her into our planning. We'll need every advantage. Cora glanced around to ensure they weren't being observed. And be cautious. Admiral Halax and his faction won't accept diplomatic resolution easily. They may take extreme measures to ensure conflict continues. Indeed, even as these words were spoken, Halax was meeting with a group of like-minded officers in a secure chamber deep within the Imperial military headquarters. Valen and her moderates are traitors to the Imperial vision, he declared to his conspirators. If they establish communication with the humans, they'll sue for peace on terms that diminish the Empire's standing. What do you propose, Admiral? Asked one of the younger officers, her ambition evident in her eager posture. The Emperor has authorized preparation of the planet destroyers. We will accelerate that preparation, and when ready, we will deploy, with or without final authorization. Halax's eyes gleamed with fanatical certainty. When the humans see their precious Terra Nova shattered, they will understand the true meaning of imperial power. And Marshal Valen? Another officer inquired. Will suffer an unfortunate accident before her diplomatic mission can bear fruit. Halax replied coldly. The Empire has no place for those who would negotiate with inferiors. Through clandestine channels established by Alice, whose mixed heritage gave her connections outside traditional imperial networks, Marshal Cora Valen managed to arrange a secret meeting with human representatives. The neutral location chosen was an abandoned mining station in unclaimed space between imperial and human territories. Admiral Helena Crowley arrived with a small delegation, her uniform crisp but unadorned with the excessive medals and insignia typical of Xandorian officers. Her demeanor was cautious but not hostile as she faced Marshal Valen across a simple table. Marshal, she acknowledged with a respectful nod. Thank you for initiating this dialogue. Admiral, Cora returned the gesture. I appreciate your willingness to meet despite recent hostilities. We prefer conversation to conflict, Crowley replied, though we've demonstrated we're capable of the latter when necessary. Indeed you have. Cora's admission was frank. That demonstration has created a complex situation within the Empire. Crowley's expression remained neutral. I imagine the concept of defeat is unfamiliar to your people. For many generations, Cora agreed. Perhaps too many. Complacency and arrogance have become institutional problems. The human admiral raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by such forthright self-criticism from a Xandorian leader. And you believe these problems can be addressed? They must be, Cora stated firmly. The Empire as it exists now faces challenges beyond just humanity. Your resistance has inspired others. Change is inevitable. The only question is whether that change comes through reform or collapse. And which do you prefer, Marshal? Cora met Crowley's gaze directly. I have served the Empire my entire life, Admiral. I believe in its potential to be a force for stability and progress. But the doctrine of subjugation and superiority that has guided us for millennia has reached its limit. It no longer serves our true interests or those of the galaxy. Crowley nodded slowly. A remarkably progressive view for a Xandorian marshal. Not as uncommon as you might think, Cora replied. Many of us have recognized the need for evolution. Your emergence has simply accelerated the timeline. Their discussion continued for hours, exploring possibilities for peaceful coexistence. Neither side fully trusted the other, but the foundations for understanding were being laid, until an urgent communication interrupted their meeting. Marshal, Zintvar's voice came through Cora's secure communicator. You must return immediately. Admiral Halax has seized control of the planet destroyer fleet. They're preparing to launch against Terra Nova. Cora's scales paled. When? The fleet departs in 6 hours. The Emperor is being held in protective custody by Halax's loyalists. Crowley, overhearing this, rose to her feet. Marshal, if your empire deploys planet-killing weapons against our colonies, there will be no possibility of peace. Humanity will respond with everything at our disposal. I understand. Cora's decision was immediate. Admiral Var, gather whatever loyal forces you can. We must prevent this launch at all costs. Against Halax's faction, we'll be outnumbered, Zenth warned. Then we'll need to be smarter, Cora replied grimly. She turned to Crowley. Admiral, I have no right to ask for your assistance, but if Halax succeeds, millions will die, and our species will be locked in a war neither can truly win. Crowley exchanged glances with her delegation before responding. We have a mutual interest in preventing genocide. Marshal, what do you propose? The next 6 hours saw frantic preparations on both sides. Admiral Zenth Var, once the embodiment of imperial doctrine, now found himself leading an impromptu resistance force comprised of officers and ships loyal to Grand Marshal Valen's vision of a reformed empire. They were a minority within the imperial fleet, but included some of its most innovative commanders, those who had recognized the need for tactical evolution even before the human encounter. Meanwhile, Admiral Crowley dispatched a small but elite contingent of human vessels, equipped with their most advanced stealth technology. Their mission was not to engage directly in what amounted to a Xandorian civil conflict, but to provide critical support in neutralizing the planet destroyers themselves. The confrontation occurred in deep space, as Halax's loyalist fleet prepared to make the final jump to human territory. Admiral Zenth's smaller force moved to intercept, positioning themselves directly in the path of the planet destroyer fleet. Admiral Halax, Zenth transmitted on an open channel, by order of Grand Marshal Caravalin. Acting with the authority of Emperor Cyrus, you are commanded to stand down and surrender your vessels. Halax's laughter echoed through the communication system. Traitors have no authority, Zenth. You've been corrupted by alien sympathies. The true defenders of the Empire will not be deterred from our sacred duty. There is nothing sacred about genocide, Zenth countered. You risk everything the Empire has built over millennia for your pride. For the Empire's survival. Halax roared. Now move aside, or be destroyed with the humans you've come to love. We will not move, Zenth declared firmly. If you wish to proceed with this atrocity, you'll have to destroy loyal Imperial citizens first. So be it, Halax replied coldly. All ships, target Zenth's traitors. No merci. The space between the opposing Imperial factions erupted in weapons fire. Zenth's forces were outnumbered nearly 3-1, but fought with a tactical flexibility previously foreign to Imperial doctrine, a direct result of studying human combat techniques. They focused on mobility and precision strikes rather than head-on confrontation, targeting propulsion and weapon systems rather than attempting to destroy vessels outright. Nevertheless, the battle's outcome seemed inevitable. Halax's superior numbers were gradually overwhelming the defenders, pushing inexorably toward their jump point to human space. It was at this critical moment that the human contingent revealed themselves, decloaking directly adjacent to the 3 planet destroyer vessels at the center of Halax's fleet. Unlike the massive warships of the main human fleet, these were smaller, specialized craft designed for a single purpose, neutralizing superweapons. Before Halax's gunners could even target the suddenly appearing vessels, the humans had launched specialized boarding drones, tiny autonomous units that attached themselves to the hulls of the planet destroyers and began cutting their way inside. Intruder alert on all primary weapon systems, came the panicked reports from the planet destroyers. Unknown technology bypassing security protocols. Within minutes, the control systems for the superweapons had been completely severed from the ship's command centers. The planet destroyers, while still functional as massive warships, had lost their apocalyptic capabilities. What have you done? Halax screamed over the communication channel as he realized his ultimate weapons had been neutralized. Prevented you from committing an atrocity that would have doomed our species, Zenth replied. Stand down, Admiral. This ends now. But Halax was beyond reason. All ships continue the attack. Destroy the traitors. Destroy the human vessels. The Empire must prevail. The battle intensified, with Halax's loyalists now fighting on two fronts, against their own kind and against the surgical precision of the human special forces. Despite their numerical advantage, confusion spread through their ranks as commanders questioned the wisdom of firing on fellow Xandorians to protect weapons that could no longer function. Sensing the shift in momentum, Zenth pressed his advantage. All Imperial personnel, Admiral Halax has directly contravened the Emperor's orders and attempted to usurp Imperial authority. Grand Marshal Valen acts with the Emperor's mandate. Stand down, and you will be treated with honor. This appeal, combined with the obvious neutralization of the planet destroyers, began to sway the balance. Ship by ship, elements of Halax's fleet ceased fire, signaling their surrender. Halax, watching his coalition crumble around him, made one final, desperate move. Target the human vessels with all remaining weapons. If we cannot use the planet destroyers, we will at least eliminate these interlopers. His flagship turned its massive batteries toward the nearest human vessel, only to be struck by precision fire from Zentha's command ship. The barrage took out the flagship's main weapons array in a series of devastating explosions. This is over, Halax, Zenth transmitted. Surrender now. For a moment, silence reigned across all communication channels. Then, from Halax's damaged flagship, this is Commander Threll. Admiral Halax has been restrained. We surrender to Imperial authority. Within hours, the crisis had been contained. Grand Marshal Cora Valen, backed by Admiral Zentha's loyal forces and with the surprising support of the human contingent, secured the release of Emperor Cyrus Amnath from his protective custody. Halax and his core conspirators were arrested for treason against the Empire. In the Imperial throne room days later, Emperor Cyrus addressed a gathering of military commanders, nobles, and, unprecedented in Imperial history, a small delegation of non-Xandorians, including Admiral Helena Crowley. The recent crisis has forced us to confront uncomfortable truths, the Emperor began, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. For millennia, the Xandorian Empire has equated dominance with strength, conquest with progress. We believed our way to be the only way, all others inherently inferior. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembled dignitaries. The emergence of humanity has proven this belief not merely arrogant, but dangerous. A species we never knew existed has demonstrated not only technological and tactical capabilities that rival our own, but a fundamentally different approach to expansion and diplomacy. Murmurs rippled through the gathering, but the Emperor continued. Were we to continue on our current path, we would face not merely resistance from humans, but the gradual disintegration of an empire built on fear rather than mutual benefit. This is not the legacy I wish to leave. The silence that followed was profound. Therefore, I am announcing a fundamental restructuring of the Xandorian Empire. Beginning immediately, we will transition from a system of subjugation to one of federation. All member species will gradually receive representation proportional to their population and contribution. The forced tributes that have long burdened our vassals will be replaced with fair trade agreements. The reaction was immediate and mixed. Shock and outrage from traditionalists, cautious optimism from progressives, and stunned disbelief from the representatives of subjugated species. To oversee this transition, I am appointing Grand Marshal Cora Valen as First Minister of the new Xandorian Assembly. Admiral Zenth Var will serve as ambassador to humanity, tasked with building a lasting peace between our civilizations. As the Emperor concluded his speech, the implications reverberated across the chamber. The Xandorian Empire, a monolithic power that had dominated the Arcturus galaxy for thousands of years, was voluntarily transforming itself rather than risk destruction through stagnation. Admiral Crowley approached Cora Valen after the address. An extraordinary moment in history, First Minister, she observed. Not many empires choose evolution over extinction. The choice was made for us, Cora replied frankly. Your emergence forced us to see what many had suspected for centuries, that our model was unsustainable. She hesitated, then added, I'm curious, though. If we hadn't chosen this path, if Halax had succeeded in deploying the planet destroyers, what would humanity have done? Crowley finished the question. I'm not authorized to share specific details of our defensive capabilities, but I can tell you this. We've faced extinction-level threats before, both from nature and from our own hands. We've prepared accordingly. The implication was clear, and Cora nodded soberly. Then we have all been spared a terrible fate. In the months that followed, the transformation of the former Xandorian Empire proceeded in fits and starts. Resistance from conservative elements was inevitable, as were opportunistic secession attempts by some former vassal states. Yet the core of the new assembly held, strengthened by genuine reforms and the surprising willingness of many subjugated species to participate in a more equitable system rather than seek independence. Meanwhile, diplomatic relations with humanity expanded. Admiral Zenthvar, once the embodiment of imperial doctrine, found himself fascinated by human culture and governance. Their chaotic diversity, which he had initially viewed as a weakness, he now recognized as the source of their remarkable adaptability. They have no single governmental system, he reported to the Assembly Council. Different colonies experiment with different models, sharing successes and learning from failures. It's inefficient in the short term, but creates an extraordinary capacity for long-term problem-solving. The scientific and cultural exchanges that followed benefited both civilizations. Xandorian engineering precision complemented human innovative thinking. Human medical advances, developed to address their comparatively fragile biology, offered new approaches to healthcare across species barriers. Trade routes established between human and Xandorian territories brought prosperity to regions that had long been neglected under the old imperial system. 1 year after the crisis, a joint expedition set out into the unexplored regions beyond the borders of both civilizations. The mission included scientists and explorers from multiple species, a tangible symbol of the new cooperative approach. At its helm were Admiral Zenthvar and Navigation Officer Alice, whose unusual perspectives had proven so valuable during the transformation. As their vessel prepared to enter uncharted space, Alice turned to Zenth on the observation deck. Strange to think that just 1 standard year ago, we believed we knew everything worth knowing about the galaxy. Zenth nodded thoughtfully, and now we realize how little we truly understood. About other species, about ourselves. He gazed at the starfield before them, filled with possibilities neither could have imagined under the old order. Who knows what's waiting for us out there? Whatever it is, Alice replied with a smile, I suspect we'll face it better together than we ever could have apart. As their ship accelerated into the unknown, the former enemies, now allies, ventured forward into a future neither civilization could have predicted, but which held more promise than either could have achieved alone. The once terrifying question, that's all humans, had transformed from an expression of disbelief at human resilience into a recognition that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in conquest, but in connection. And across the Arcturus galaxy, species that had known only subjugation for generations looked to the stars with something long forgotten: hope.